March 2019. A Tuesday evening in suburban New Jersey. Mary Thompson picks up her phone to call her husband of 17 years. He's away on another business trip to Florida, or at least, that's what she believes. She dials the hotel number he left on the kitchen counter that morning, the same routine they've followed hundreds of times before. The front desk picks up. She asks for his room. There's a brief pause, some muffled conversation in the background, then the line clicks. It rings once, twice. On the third ring, a woman answers. Not the hotel operator, a woman's voice, casual, familiar, like she's answering her own phone. Mary freezes. She asks for Thomas Thompson. The woman on the other end doesn't hesitate. She says, "He's in the shower right now. Can I take a message?" Mary's heart is racing now. She asks who she's speaking to. The woman laughs, a light, comfortable laugh, and says something that will shatter Mary Thompson's entire world. "I'm his wife." "Who's this?" For a moment, Mary can't breathe. She can't speak. The room around her seems to tilt. His wife, those two words echo in her mind as the line goes quiet. The woman on the other end is waiting for an answer. Mary hangs up. Her hands are trembling. Her mind is racing through 17 years of memories, every business trip, every late night at the office, every weekend he said he had to work, and in that moment, standing in her kitchen with her two teenage daughters upstairs doing homework, Mary Thompson realizes she doesn't know her husband at all. What she's about to discover will reveal a deception so elaborate, so calculated, that it will take investigators months to untangle the full scope of Thomas Thompson's double life, because this wasn't just an affair, this was two complete families. Two wives, 4 children, 2 homes, 2 separate lives running parallel to each other for over a decade. And nobody suspected a thing. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. Mary Thompson met Thomas in 2001 at a pharmaceutical sales conference in Philadelphia. She was a marketing coordinator. He was charming, ambitious, working his way up as a regional sales director. They married in 2002, bought a modest colonial-style home in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Their first daughter, Emily, was born in 2003, their second, Jessica, in 2005. By all accounts, they had built a solid life together. Thomas worked for a major pharmaceutical company, traveling frequently throughout the Northeast and down to Florida where the company had regional offices. The travel made sense. 3, sometimes 4 nights a week, he'd be gone. Sales meetings, client dinners, training sessions, Mary never questioned it. In fact, she'd built her own routine around his schedule: book club on Tuesdays, yoga on Thursdays, girls' nights when Thomas was away. Every Sunday morning when he was home, Thomas made pancakes for the girls, chocolate chip for Emily, blueberry for Jessica. He coached Jessica's soccer team in the fall. He helped Emily study for her SATs. He remembered anniversaries, brought flowers, planned romantic weekend getaways to the Poconos. Mary Thompson trusted her husband completely. She had no reason not to. Their marriage wasn't perfect, whose is, but it was stable, comfortable, predictable. Or at least, that's what she thought. That phone call in March 2019 changed everything. After Mary hung up, she stood in her kitchen for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only minutes. Her first instinct was denial. Maybe she misheard, maybe it was a coworker playing a strange joke, maybe Thomas had given out the wrong room number. But that voice kept replaying in her mind. "I'm his wife," the casual certainty of it, the comfort, the familiarity. Mary tried calling Thomas directly on his cell phone, no answer. She tried again, voicemail. She sent a text, "Call me immediately." Then she did something she'd never done in 17 years of their marriage. She went into Thomas's home office. She opened his desk drawers. She looked through his file cabinets. She was searching for something, anything, that might explain what just happened. She found the usual things: old tax returns, insurance documents, work contracts. Nothing unusual, nothing that suggested her husband was anything other than what he claimed to be. Then she remembered his laptop. He always took it with him on trips, but he had a tablet he sometimes used at home. She found it in his briefcase. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. She tried his password, their wedding anniversary. It didn't work. She tried Emily's birthday, nothing. Jessica's birthday, still nothing. On the fourth try, she typed in a random string of numbers she'd seen him use once at the bank. It unlocked. What Mary Thompson found in that tablet would be the first thread that, once pulled, would unravel an entire secret life. The browser history showed recent searches: hotels in Fort Myers, Florida, restaurants in Fort Myers, schools in Fort Myers. Mary didn't recognize these searches as work-related. Thomas's company had offices in Miami and Tampa, not Fort Myers. But what caught her attention was a saved bookmark folder labeled simply FL. Inside were links to a neighborhood community website, a pediatrician's office, and a local elementary school. Why would Thomas need a pediatrician in Fort Myers? Their daughters were both teenagers. They didn't need a pediatrician anymore, and certainly not one in Florida. Mary clicked on the community website. It was for a gated residential neighborhood called Cypress Cove. She scrolled through photos of the development: palm trees, pool facilities, Mediterranean-style homes. Then she saw something that made her stomach drop. A community newsletter from 2 months earlier, February 2019. It showed photos from a neighborhood Valentine's Day party. And there, in the background of one photo, was Thomas. He's standing next to a blonde woman Mary has never seen before. They're both smiling, and between them, holding their hands, are 2 young children. But here's what made Mary's blood run cold. Thomas is wearing the same shirt Mary bought him for Valentine's Day, the one he said he'd wear to his client dinner in Tampa that night. The question burning in Mary's mind was simple, yet terrifying. Who are these people? Pause for a minute. What would you do in this moment if it was you? Would you confront him immediately, or would you keep digging to find out the full truth? Mary Thompson didn't sleep that night. While her daughters slept upstairs, she sat at the kitchen table with Thomas's tablet, going through every file, every photo, every email she could access. In a hidden folder marked Work Files, Archive, she finds something that doesn't belong: photos. Dozens of them, and they tell a story Mary isn't prepared to hear. There's Thomas at a beach, with the same blonde woman from the newsletter is beside him, both of them in swimsuits, laughing. There's Thomas pushing a young boy on a swing set. There's Thomas at what looks like a birthday party, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, blowing out candles on a cake while Thomas stands behind her, hands on her shoulders, beaming with pride. The photos span years. Mary scrolls back through the dates. 2018, 2017, 2016, some go back as far as 2013. 6 years of photos, 6 years of a life she knew nothing about. Her hands are shaking as she keeps scrolling. She finds a photo dated August 2014. It's Thomas and the blonde woman, both dressed up, standing in front of what appears to be a courthouse. They're holding hands. The woman is wearing a white dress. Thomas is in a suit Mary recognizes, the same suit he wore to his cousin's wedding that summer. Mary enlarges the photo. She zooms in on the woman's hand. There's a ring, a wedding ring. The realization hits her like a physical blow. These aren't vacation photos. This isn't an affair. This is another family, a whole other family. The next morning, Mary called in sick to work. She dropped her daughters at school and then sat in her car in the parking lot, trying to decide what to do next. She couldn't confront Thomas yet, not until she knew the full scope of what she was dealing with. She needed help, professional help. Through a recommendation from a friend, Mary contacted a private investigator named David Chen, who specialized in matrimonial investigations. When Mary met with Chen that afternoon and showed him what she'd found, he was immediately concerned. This wasn't a typical infidelity case. Chen got to work quickly. Within 48 hours, he had answers. And those answers were staggering. Thomas Thompson owned a second home. Not rented, owned, a 3-bedroom house in the Cypress Cove development in Fort Myers, Florida, purchased in 2012. The deed was in his name, though the mailing address was a P.O. box. The blonde woman's name was Kelly Brennan. Except her legal name, according to county records, was Kelly Thompson. She had legally changed her surname in 2014, the same year as the courthouse photo. Kelly had 2 children, a son, Luke, born in 2010, a daughter, Mia, born in 2013. Both birth certificates listed Thomas Thompson as the father. Chen's surveillance revealed the pattern. Thomas would spend approximately 2 weeks per month in New Jersey with Mary and their daughters, then he'd spend 2 weeks in Florida with Kelly and their children. The schedule was remarkably consistent. He'd leave New Jersey on a Sunday night, telling Mary he had a week of back-to-back meetings in Florida and the Southeast. He'd return the following Sunday afternoon, just in time for family dinner and his traditional pancake breakfast the next morning. Then, the following week, he'd tell Kelly the same story in reverse. Regional meetings up north, he'd say, "I'll be back next Sunday." For 7 years, Thomas Thompson maintained 2 complete families, neither of whom knew the other existed. But here's what shocked even the private investigator: both wives thought they had a normal, stable marriage. Both described Thomas as attentive, loving, involved. He remembered birthdays, he attended parent-teacher conferences. In both states, he coached Luke's t-ball team in Florida the same way he coached Jessica's soccer team in New Jersey. The obvious question Mary asked the investigator was, how? How could one person afford to maintain 2 households, 2 mortgages, 2 families? The answer revealed another layer of deception. Thomas Thompson was making approximately $180,000 per year in his legitimate job as a pharmaceutical sales director. A comfortable salary, but not enough to support 2 complete families, 2 mortgages, and maintain the lifestyle he was presenting to both wives. Chen dug into Thomas's financials and found a complex web of accounts. Thomas had at least 6 different credit cards, 3 bank accounts, and 2 separate financial identities he was maintaining. Mary was on one set of accounts, Kelly was on another set, and some accounts had only Thomas's name. But the money was coming from more than just his salary. Thomas had been systematically defrauding his employer for years: false expense reports, fictitious client dinners, inflated travel costs. He'd submit hotel receipts from Fort Myers claiming they were business trips, when in reality, he was staying at his second home with his second family. He'd claim mileage for client visits that never happened. He'd charge personal flights to the company card and then submit matching receipts that showed business purposes. Over 7 years, investigators would later estimate, Thomas had embezzled approximately $430,000 from his employer through fraudulent expenses. He also took out a second mortgage on the New Jersey house without Mary's knowledge, forging her signature on the documents. That gave him an additional $150,000 to work with. The scheme was elaborate, carefully planned, and executed with precision. Thomas kept detailed spreadsheets, found later on an encrypted drive, tracking his expenses, his schedules, his stories. He knew exactly what he'd told each wife, when he'd be where, how much money he needed to maintain both lives. It was meticulous, it was calculated. And for 7 years, it worked perfectly. Until that phone call in March 2019, when Mary accidentally dialed the wrong number. Can you just ponder for a few seconds? How does someone maintain 2 separate lives without anyone noticing? What kind of person can compartmentalize to that degree? Armed with the investigators' findings, Mary Thompson faced an impossible decision. Does she confront Thomas? Does she go to the police? Does she contact the other woman? After days of agonizing, Mary made a choice that would change everything. She decided to reach out to Kelly. Finding her wasn't difficult. the investigator had provided Kelly's contact information. On a Friday afternoon in late March, Mary sent a message through Facebook Messenger. She kept it simple. "Hi Kelly, my name is Mary Thompson. I need to speak with you about Thomas. It's urgent, please call me." Kelly called within an hour. Mary could hear the confusion in her voice. "Do I know you? How do you know Tom?" Mary took a breath. "I'm his wife. We've been married for 17 years. We have 2 daughters." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Kelly laughed. Not a happy laugh, but the kind of laugh someone makes when they can't process what they're hearing. "That's not possible. I'm his wife. We've been together since 2009. We got married in 2014. What followed was a 3-hour phone call that neither woman would ever forget. They compared stories, timelines, photographs. They looked at their calendars and realized the pattern. When Thomas was with Mary, Kelly thought he was on business trips. When he was with Kelly, Mary thought the same thing. Kelly pulled out photos from her wedding, August 2014, at a courthouse in Fort Myers. Mary pulled up photos from her anniversary trip with Thomas that same month. He'd taken her to a bed and breakfast in Vermont, said it was to celebrate their 12th anniversary. The same month, Thomas had married Kelly while still married to Mary. Both women went through their memories of birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. They realized Thomas had been celebrating everything twice: 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases, 2 birthday celebrations for himself. He'd even managed to attend both daughters' school events, Emily's piano recital in New Jersey and Mia's dance recital in Florida, on the same weekend by claiming he needed to cut the business trip short for a family emergency. As they talked, the initial shock gave way to a shared sense of betrayal and rage. These weren't just 2 women who'd been cheated on, these were 2 women who'd built their entire lives around a man who didn't exist. Every memory was now tainted, every special moment was a lie, every "I love you" had been said to someone else the week before. By the end of the call, Mary and Kelly had made a decision. They weren't going to confront Thomas separately, they were going to do it together. And they were going to make sure he faced consequences for what he'd done, not just to them, but to their children. They planned it carefully. Thomas was scheduled to return to Florida on Sunday, April 7, 2019. Kelly would be expecting him home that evening, as she had dozens of times before. But this time, Mary would be there too. Mary flew to Fort Myers on Saturday. She stayed at a hotel near Kelly's neighborhood. That Sunday morning, she met Kelly in person for the first time. They sat in Kelly's living room, 2 women whose lives had been running parallel for 7 years, finally occupying the same space. At 6:47 p.m., Kelly received a text from Thomas: "Just landed, be home in 30." Mary's phone buzzed at the same time. Thomas had sent her a message too: "Settled in at the hotel. Long day, love you." At 7:15 p.m., Thomas's car pulled into the driveway of the Fort Myers home. He walks up to the front door, keys in hand, ready to step into his Florida life. He opens the door and calls out, "I'm home." Kelly is standing in the living room, but she's not alone. Thomas stops. His face goes pale. He's looking at Kelly, then at Mary, then back at Kelly. His mouth opens, but no words came out. Mary speaks first. Her voice is steady, though her hands are clenched at her sides. "Hello, Thomas, or should I call you Tom?" "That's what Kelly calls you, isn't it?" Thomas tries to recover. He starts to say something about Mary being there for work, about this being a misunderstanding, but Kelly cuts him off. "Stop, just stop. We know everything." For the next 2 hours, Mary and Kelly lay out everything they've discovered. The 2 families, the false expenses, the forged mortgage documents, the elaborate schedules and the double life. Thomas tries different approaches. First, denial. This is all some kind of mistake, some confusion. Then, when presented with evidence, he shifts to excuses. He claims he never meant for it to happen this way, that things just got complicated, that he loved both of them and couldn't choose. He tries charm, then anger, then pleading, but Mary and Kelly don't waver. They've had days to process this, they've talked through their shock and grief. Now they're unified in their resolve. At one point, Kelly's children came downstairs. Luke is 9 years old. Mia is 6. They're excited to see their dad. "Daddy!" Mia runs toward him. Thomas picks her up, and for just a moment, his mask cracks. He's crying, because he knows, this is the last time he'll hold her as the father she thinks he is. After tonight, everything changes. That night, Thomas left the Fort Myers house. He checked into a hotel. He wouldn't return to either home again. On Monday morning, April 8, 2019, Mary Thompson filed for divorce in New Jersey. That same day, Kelly Thompson, she would later revert to her maiden name, Brennan, filed for an annulment in Florida, arguing the marriage was invalid due to Thomas's existing marriage to Mary. Both women also contacted Thomas's employer. The company immediately launched an internal investigation. By Wednesday, Thomas had been terminated. By Friday, the company had referred the case to law enforcement for potential criminal charges. But the legal matters were only one part of the aftermath. The real devastation was what this did to the children. Emily and Jessica, Thomas's daughters with Mary, were 16 and 14 years old. Old enough to understand what their father had done, old enough to feel betrayed, Emily stopped speaking to Thomas entirely. Jessica agreed to see him once, at a counselor's office, but told him she needed time. Luke and Mia, Thomas's children with Kelly, were younger, 9 and 6. They didn't fully understand why their dad suddenly wasn't living with them anymore, why mom was crying all the time, why there were lawyers and police officers asking questions. And then came the revelation that shook both families even further. Luke, Mia, Emily, and Jessica were half-siblings. For children who'd been living separate lives, celebrating birthdays on different weekends, going to different schools, never knowing the others existed. They shared a father who'd carefully kept them apart. Both Mary and Kelly faced an agonizing question: do they tell the children about each other? Do they try to facilitate some kind of relationship? Or do they protect them from yet another complicated truth? Wow! For innocent children caught in the wake of their father's deception. How do you even begin to explain this to them? The legal consequences for Thomas Thompson came swiftly and from multiple directions. In May 2019, Thomas was arrested and charged with bigamy, a third-degree crime in both New Jersey and Florida. Under New Jersey law, bigamy carries a potential sentence of 3 to 5 years in prison. Florida law is similar. But that was just the beginning. Thomas's employer, MedFarm Solutions, conducted a thorough audit of his expense reports going back 8 years. The findings were damning. Over $430,000 in fraudulent expenses. The company pressed charges for theft by deception and corporate fraud. Additionally, the forged signature on the second mortgage document led to charges of forgery and fraud against financial institutions. In total, Thomas faced 14 separate criminal charges across 2 states. His attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but prosecutors weren't interested in leniency. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was systematic, calculated fraud perpetrated over nearly a decade. The case went to trial in November 2019 in New Jersey Superior Court. Mary and Kelly both testified. Their testimony was devastating. Mary described the moment she realized her entire marriage had been a fabrication. "I looked back at 17 years of my life and realized I didn't know the person I'd been sharing it with," she told the court. "Every memory I have is now questionable. Every holiday, every anniversary, every moment I thought was special, he was doing the same things with another family the next week. How do you process that?" Kelly's testimony was equally powerful. She spoke about the impact on her children, about the trust that had been shattered, about the financial hardship she now faced as a single mother trying to keep her home while dealing with the legal aftermath. Thomas's defense was weak. His attorney argued that Thomas suffered from a psychological condition that caused him to compartmentalize his life, that he genuinely believed he could make both families happy, that he never intended to hurt anyone. The jury wasn't convinced. After deliberating for less than 6 hours, they returned guilty verdicts on all counts. At sentencing in January 2020, Judge Patricia Martinez didn't hold back. "Mr. Thompson, you didn't just betray 2 women who loved you, you betrayed 4 innocent children, you robbed them of their childhoods, their sense of security, their ability to trust, you created an elaborate fiction that served only your own desires, with no regard for the devastation it would cause when that fiction inevitably collapsed." Thomas Thompson was sentenced to 8 years in state prison. He was ordered to pay full restitution to his former employer, $430,000 plus interest and legal fees. He was also ordered to pay child support for all 4 children, though given his current incarceration and lack of assets, both Mary and Kelly knew they'd likely never see that money. The judge also issued a recommendation that Thomas receive psychological evaluation and treatment during his incarceration, noting that the level of deception required to maintain this double life for so many years suggests deep-seated psychological issues that should be addressed. After the trial, Mary Thompson and Kelly Brennan faced the difficult task of rebuilding their lives and helping their children heal. In an unexpected turn, the 2 women developed a genuine friendship. They started meeting for coffee, at first just to compare notes on the legal proceedings and coordinate information about Thomas. But over time, those meetings became a source of mutual support. "Kelly is one of the few people who truly understands what I went through," Mary explained in an interview she gave to a local news station in 2020. "We were both victims of the same person's deception. We both loved someone who didn't really exist. That creates a bond." In the summer of 2019, Mary and Kelly made the difficult decision to introduce the children to each other. They arranged a supervised meeting at a family therapist's office. Luke, Mia, Emily, and Jessica met their half-siblings for the first time. It was awkward at first. The age gap made things challenging. Emily and Jessica were teenagers, while Luke and Mia were still in elementary school. But slowly, tentatively, they began to build relationships. By the following Christmas, the 2 families celebrated together. Not because of Thomas, but despite him, Mary hosted the gathering in New Jersey. Kelly and her children flew up from Florida. They exchanged gifts, made dinner together, and created new traditions that weren't tainted by deception. "Our kids deserve to know each other," Kelly said. "They share DNA. They're siblings. What their father did doesn't change that." Both women also sought professional help to process their trauma. Mary joined a support group for victims of fraud and deception. Kelly started seeing a therapist who specialized in relationship trauma and identity reconstruction. Financially, both families struggled. Kelly eventually sold the Fort Myers house. She couldn't afford the mortgage on her salary as a dental hygienist, and the house held too many painful memories anyway. She moved into a smaller apartment with Luke and Mia. Mary refinanced the New Jersey house, removing Thomas's name from the mortgage and consolidating the debt from the fraudulent second mortgage he'd taken out. It would take years to recover financially, but she was determined to keep the home stable for her daughters. Both women eventually returned to dating, though both admitted they struggled with trust issues. "How do you trust anyone again after something like that?" Mary asked. "I lived with someone for 17 years and didn't know he was living a double life. What else might I miss?" The case of Thomas Thompson raised questions that experts are still attempting to answer. Dr. Jennifer Hartwell, a forensic psychologist who evaluated Thomas during his trial, described his behavior as an extreme example of compartmentalization. "Some individuals have an remarkable ability to separate different aspects of their lives into distinct mental boxes," she explained. They can genuinely experience emotions and relationships in one context without feeling the cognitive dissonance that most people would feel about the contradictions in other contexts. But Dr. Hartwell also noted that Thomas's case went beyond typical compartmentalization. This required sustained, deliberate deception. This was planned. The financial fraud, the false documents, the elaborate scheduling, these weren't impulsive actions. This was a man who made conscious choices every single day for nearly a decade to maintain these lies. Psychologists point to several red flags that, in retrospect, both Mary and Kelly could have noticed. The extensive travel. The limited integration into each other's social circles, the fact that neither woman had met much of Thomas's extended family. His resistance to social media and his insistence on keeping separate phone lines for work and personal use. But experts also emphasize that victims of this kind of deception shouldn't blame themselves. These individuals are often highly skilled manipulators, noted Dr. Hartwell. They're charming, attentive, and very good at reading people and knowing exactly what to say to allay suspicions. The Thompson case isn't unique. While exact statistics are difficult to compile, experts estimate that thousands of people in the United States are currently living double lives, maintaining separate families, separate identities, separate existences. Some are discovered, like Thomas, many are not. In 2014, a man in Utah was discovered to have 4 wives and numerous children across 3 states. In 2016, a woman in California was found to have 2 husbands, neither of whom knew about the other. In 2018, a firefighter in Ohio was exposed for maintaining 3 separate families over 15 years. The common threads in these cases: frequent travel for work, careful financial management, strong compartmentalization skills, and partners who trusted implicitly. The warning signs, according to experts: excessive secrecy around phones and computers, reluctance to integrate families and social circles, inconsistencies in stories about travel and schedules, and resistance to unplanned visits or surprise contact during business trips. Looking at the warning signs now, they seem obvious. But when you trust someone completely, would you even think to look for them? Could this happen to someone you know? Thomas Thompson is currently serving his sentence at New Jersey State Prison. His earliest possible release date is January 2026, though he could serve the full 8-year term through 2028. He has had minimal contact with his children. Emily has refused all communication. Jessica visited him once in 2021 but hasn't returned since. Luke and Mia, now 13 and 9 years old, speak to him occasionally by phone, but Kelly has limited those conversations to supervised calls with a therapist present. Thomas has expressed remorse in letters to both Mary and Kelly, though neither woman has responded. In one letter that was shared during a parole hearing, Thomas wrote, "I know there's nothing I can say that will undo the harm I've caused. I lied to everyone, including myself. I convinced myself I could make everyone happy, but all I did was destroy the people who loved me." Mary Thompson still lives in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. She works as a regional manager for a healthcare consulting firm. Emily graduated high school in 2021 and is now attending college in Pennsylvania. Jessica is a junior in high school, a talented artist who plans to study graphic design. Mary remarried in 2023 to a man she met through mutual friends. She describes her new husband as the opposite of Thomas, completely transparent, almost to a fault. Kelly Brennan returned to using her maiden name after the annulment was finalized. She and her children moved to Tampa, Florida, for a fresh start. She now works as a dental office manager and has started a blog about rebuilding after betrayal and deception. The blog has gained a following, and Kelly has been invited to speak at several conferences about her experience. Luke and Mia are doing well, according to Kelly, though both are in ongoing therapy. They're resilient, Kelly said in a recent interview. They still love their dad, which is complicated. But they're learning that you can love someone and still acknowledge that they did terrible things. Perhaps most remarkably, the 4 children, Emily, Jessica, Luke, and Mia, have maintained their relationships with each other. They text regularly. Emily and Jessica visit Tampa during school breaks. Luke and Mia flew to New Jersey last summer to attend Emily's high school graduation. They're siblings, Mary said. What their father did doesn't change that. If anything good came from this nightmare, it's that these 4 kids found each other. The story of Thomas Thompson and his double life forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, deception, and the versions of reality we construct in our relationships. Mary Thompson said something in her victim impact statement that has stayed with many people who followed this case. "I didn't just lose my husband, I lost my entire past. Every memory I have is now suspect. I look at photo albums and I don't know what's real anymore. Was he happy in this picture, or was he thinking about his other family? When he said, 'I love you,' did he mean it, or was it just part of the performance?" That's the unique cruelty of this kind of deception. It doesn't just damage the present and future, it retroactively poisons the past. But Mary and Kelly's stories are also about resilience and recovery. They're about 2 women who could have become consumed by bitterness and rage, but instead chose to support each other, protect their children, and build new lives from the wreckage. They're about 4 children who could have been permanently scarred by their father's actions, but instead are forming their own bonds and creating their own definition of family. The human capacity for deception is disturbing, but the human capacity for recovery, for forgiveness, and for building something new from broken pieces, that might be even more powerful. If this story left you stunned, you're not alone. Cases like Thomas Thompson's are more common than you might think, and the psychological manipulation involved is chilling. Next week, we'll be covering another case of deception that will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss